The Yosemite National Park is a treasured UNESCO World Heritage Site that is visited by over 3.5 million tourists and Americans each year. Renowned for its majestic waterfalls and picturesque mountain views, Yosemite is one of the most iconic places to hike. But in the late 90s, the tranquil and peaceful ambiance that once permeated throughout the national park was tainted by a cold and chilling serial killer. On the 12th of February 1999, mother and daughter Carol and Julie Sund and Argentinian foreign exchange student Silvina Peloso left Eureka, California to journey to Yosemite National Park. Carol planned to take her 15-year-old daughter Julie and 16-year-old Silvina on a vacation, as her daughter's friend had flown over to the USA to live with the Sunds for 3 months. The three women began their journey by flying to San Francisco, where Carol rented a red 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix to drive around with on their vacation. On their way to the Cedar Lodge Motel, they stopped into Stockton, just north of Modesto, where Julie competed in a cheerleading competition. After finishing up in Stockton on the 14th of February, the three continued on to the Cedar Lodge Motel at El Portal, located on the western side of Yosemite National Park. Carol had booked a room with the plan to stay for a few nights, before meeting her husband in Arizona for a business trip. Carol's husband Jens decided to stay at home during their trip so he could be well prepared for his meeting. On the 15th of February, the women decided to explore the national park by hiking up one of its many scenic trails. After a long hike, they wanted to kick back and relax, so they headed down to the service desk to pick out some videos to watch in their room. This would be the last time that they were seen. The next morning, the Cedar Lodge staff told police that they cleaned the room that the three women were staying in, and they noticed nothing suspicious or out of the ordinary. Carol had organised ahead of time to check out of the lodge in advance. The plan was for her to leave the room key on the desk inside the room, and it would be collected by staff. After their stay at Yosemite, the plan was for the three women to meet Jens at San Francisco Airport, where they would join him in Arizona. Jens would attend his business meeting, and Carol planned to take the girls to the Grand Canyon. Jens waited at the airport, but the girls never showed up. He presumed that they must have flown directly to Arizona, and would meet him there instead. However, the next day, after repeated attempts to contact Carol, Jens notified the police that his wife, daughter, and her friend were all missing. After the police were notified of the disappearance of the women, local authority and park rangers were dispatched to search the Cedar Lodge and the surrounding area of the Yosemite National Park. It was initially believed that the three may have just gone on another hike through one of the trails, but unlike the day before, had gotten lost or deviated too far away from the track. The rental dealership that Carol obtained the red Pontiac from told police that the car had not been returned, and there was no agreement made to extend the lease. A 4-week search was conducted, and police, family, and volunteers banded together to search for the missing women. There were no signs of the women until more than 2 hours away from where they were last seen. Carol's purse was found in Modesto. Surprisingly, the purse still had her money in it, and her credit cards were still intact. The lead FBI investigator, James Maddock, now had a heavy suspicion that the women were the victims of a violent crime. Once Carol's wallet had been found, police worked out the most logical routes that would have been taken to get from the Cedar Lodge Motel to where the purse was found in Modesto. Investigators interviewed a multitude of homeowners, businesses, and travellers that were residing between the two locations. It had now been 12 days since the women had disappeared, and police were no longer treating the incident as a missing persons case, but instead as an act of foul play. Jens was desperate for any information relating to the whereabouts of his loved ones, offering a total of $300,000 for information that would lead to the women's safe return. Carol and Jen's other children initially remained hopeful that their mother and sister would be returned. But after a month, and no further signs of the women, the Sund family became less optimistic. In a gathering where over 1,000 people came together, Carol's 13-year-old daughter Gina Sund read a poem to the crowd. It said, "Deep in my heart, I know something my mind doesn't want to learn. I try to stay strong, because I know you'd want your baby to be, but Mummy, I don't want you to leave me." On the 18th of March, the police's initial suspicions had sadly come true. A hiker came across the 1999 red Pontiac Grand Prix, burnt and concealed off of Highway 108. After local police checked the license plate of the Pontiac, they confirmed that it was driven by the missing women, and they immediately contacted the FBI. The FBI arrived on scene and inspected the burn site. Opening the trunk, the Sund and Peloso family's worst fears had come true, as it revealed 2 severely burnt bodies. Days later, medical examiners identified through dental records that the 2 bodies in the trunk were that of Carol Sund and Silvina Peloso. On the 25th of March, 1 week after the bodies of her mother and friend had been found, Julie's body was found near Lake Pedro. Her body was badly decomposed, and there were signs that her throat had been slashed. After the tragic discovery of the women's bodies, the FBI and police began questioning well-known criminals that resided in a 75 square metre radius between Sonoma and Modesto. Due to the location of the Pontiac, the investigators believed that the killer had extensive knowledge of the area. There were 4 men in particular that the FBI believed could be responsible for the murder of the women. The police and FBI had a number of other suspects, but most of them that were interrogated were deemed to not be involved. On the 21st of July, a man contacted police about the disappearance of his friend Joey Armstrong. The pair had planned to meet up after Joey had finished work, but she never showed up. Joey had been at Yosemite National Park working for the past year for the Yosemite Institute. Her fellow workers said that they saw her working at the Yosemite Institute offices, and that she had planned to catch up with a friend in Sausalito after she had finished. When she didn't show up to meet her friend, the man called her workplace, but she wasn't there either. The local police showed up, finding Joey's car still parked at Yosemite, with everything she needed for the trip inside. The next day, on the 22nd of July, Joey's body was found decapitated on the edge of a stream. She was found not far from where she was staying in the Forester community. 2 days later, the FBI held a press conference, telling the public that a man was in custody following the death of Joey Armstrong, and they had strong suspicions that he was involved in her murder. Police had brought in 37-year-old Kerry Stainer for questioning, a suspect in the murders of Carol, Julie, and Sylvina. Stainer was questioned by detectives and asked about his whereabouts at the time of Joey's murder. A search was also conducted of Stainer's truck, and his backpack was seized. While they were gathering enough evidence to formally charge Stainer with Joey's murder, police prohibited him from leaving the El Portal area. Stainer's apartment was also searched, and the police found evidence linking Stainer to her murder. They also found information relating to the murders of Carol, Julie, and Sylvina. The FBI and Mariposa County Sheriff's Office collected evidence in the motel room that the 3 women stayed in. In room 509, tracings of hair, fluid, and palm prints belonging to Stainer were obtained. Stainer's hair, fluid, and fingerprints were also found in Joey's room. When the FBI agents came to arrest Stainer, it was discovered that he had disobeyed police orders and had left the area. Police eventually found Stainer at Laguna del Sol, a nudist colony that he had visited many times before. Police took Stainer into custody and returned him back to the El Portal area to be further interrogated. Police alleged that on the way back to El Portal, Stainer confessed to the murder of Joey, saying that he recited the act as if he was reading a soup label. Once in custody, he also confessed to the Sons and Peloso murders. In a cold and callous interview with detectives, Stainer said that in order for him to provide police with a full confession, they had to comply with his demands. The list of demands were unimaginable, with it being alleged that Stainer told detectives that he wanted all the reward money to be given to his parents, a movie of the week being made about what he had done, to be incarcerated near where his parents lived, and to be given explicit child material. Police refused to entertain Stainer's absurd and disgusting demands, and he eventually agreed to give a full confession anyway. The FBI had enough information to arrest Stainer for the murder of Joey Armstrong. In 2002, 3 years after the murders, Stainer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity for the murder of Carol, Julie, and Sylvina. The courtroom watched on as a cold and emotionless Stainer described how he brutally murdered and assaulted the women. Stainer told police that he planned on sexually assaulting and murdering 2 other groups of women before the 4 murders he carried out. He had a backpack on hand that he assembled as a murder kit, which contained duct tape, rope, a knife, and gun inside. He also confessed to police that he planned to sexually abuse and murder his girlfriend and her 2 younger daughters. He decided against it though after a male caretaker was on the property at the time. He used his workplace as a hunting ground, seeking out his first victim amongst the many explorers that traversed the national park. On the 14th of July, the day Carol and the 2 girls headed to Yosemite, Stainer stalked a group of 4 girls staying at Cedar Lodge. He backed off, however, after realizing that they were accompanied by another man. The next night, however, Stainer saw Carol, Julie, and Sylvina through the outside of their room window. He decided that they would be his victims. Stainer approached the women's room under the guise of needing to fix a leak in their room. Carol was hesitant at first, speaking to Stainer through the front window. She only gave him access to the room after he told her that he would go and get the manager to confirm for her. He went through to the bathroom where he pretended to work on a fan. He told police Carol was reading a book while the girls were watching Jerry Maguire. He came out of the bathroom with a gun in hand, binding and gagging the woman with duct tape. He first strangled Carol with a piece of rope and put her body into the trunk of the Pontiac. He then came back inside and cut the clothes off the two younger girls, trying to make them perform sexual acts on each other. However, Silvina was sobbing uncontrollably, and Stainer snapped, taking her to the bathroom before strangling her. Julie and Silvina suffered horrific abuse at the hands of Stainer. He left Julie tied up on the bed whilst he cleaned up the room, and put Silvina's body next to Carol's. He then wrapped up Julie in a pink blanket and carried her out to the Pontiac. Then, driving aimlessly, he said that he had no destination in mind, adding that during the drive Julie was a calm and likeable girl. They then arrived at Lake Don Pedro, and Stainer carried a still-bound Julie up a nearby trail. He then proceeded to sexually assault her again, before professing his love to her and cutting her throat. Stainer left Julie's body lying under brush before returning to the car. He drove the car off a trail on Highway 108 and returned 2 days later with a jerry can of petrol. Before her death, Julie told Stainer that her name was Sarah, and he carved the words, "We have Sarah," into the hood of the Pontiac before setting it alight. In the case of Joey Armstrong, Stainer said that she caught his eye when she was walking through Yosemite. He held her up at gunpoint, binding her mouth and hands with duct tape. He made her get into his vehicle and intended on sexually assaulting her. Joey, however, took the opportunity to jump out the window and started running into the woods. Sadly, Stainer chased her down, pinning her to the ground before cutting her throat and decapitating her. He then left her body in a nearby creek. The evidence against Stainer was overwhelming, and he showed no emotion as he was convicted to 3 life sentences for the murder of Carol, Julie, and Silvina. Stainer was already incarcerated with a life sentence for the murder of Joey. He was sentenced to death in August of 2002. Kerry Stainer's family were no strangers to the evil that exists in the world, with their other son, Stephen Stainer, being abducted at the age of 7 years old. Stephen suffered horrific abuse at the hands of his captor, and was forced to lure another child into captivity. Heroically, Stephen was able to escape from his kidnapper, and his case gained a great deal of media attention. Stephen was revered for being a hero, saving himself and Timothy White from captivity, a stark contrast to his evil and callous older brother. Kerry was 11 years old at the time of Stephen's disappearance, and it has been said that he became increasingly jealous of the attention that his young brother had. Stainer, now aged 61, is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Although he's been sentenced to capital punishment, the jurisdiction that he's detained in has not carried out executions since 2006. Regardless, Stainer is not eligible for parole and will never be released. He is now confined inside of a 48 square feet cell in isolation, where he is only let out occasionally for exercise or to speak to his legal team. In memory of Joey Armstrong's short but inspiring life, the Yosemite Armstrong Scholars Program has been created in her honor. The program welcomes younger women to develop a stronger sense of self and explore their personal connection to nature by partaking in a 12-day wilderness backpacking adventure at Yosemite.